Hi, this is Oriana López Uribe. I'm from Mexico. I work as an executive director in Balance, and I'm a speaker for the Fondo Maria, which is an abortion fund that works in Mexico for everyone that needs an abortion down here. And I'm a member of RESURJ, and I'm a member of Vecinas Feministas.
Hello, my name is Laura Valenciano. I am from Costa Rica. I am a feminist activist here. I am currently directing Asociación Ciudadana ACCEDER, which is an NGO that focuses on the effective access of human rights for women and LGBTQI populations. And we have a strong component focusing on sexual and reproductive justice and sexual and reproductive rights. And I'm also a part of Movimiento Aborto Legal Costa Rica, which is a national movement that started in 2018, advocating for the legal access to abortion here. And I am also a member of RESURJ. I mean, like, we've also had marches. Costa Rica not on the question, but we've had marches as well. And I think pretty much every other Central American country as well, except for Honduras, I know that have had marches as well.
Also Honduras, no? Right now with the, well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're doing something for the elections. But I think that Latin America has a lot of history of having marches on abortion. We are the home of the international, what is the name? The International Global Action Day for access to abortion. And it was called the Decriminalization Day, the 28th of September campaign. So we have been having these marches for more than 40 years, since the 70s, I guess. And that's one of the first demands of the feminist movement in Latin America is reproductive autonomy. So I think that is one thing that has happened since a lot of years ago, but also since the movement in Argentina, the Marea Verde, started to have all this like push on the streets of Argentina. I think that we all became a little bit more open about our being with the pro-abortion rights, and the green scarf became like a symbol of I am pro-choice, I am pro-abortion, I believe in reproductive justice, and I believe that abortion should be an option for everyone. And that was the way I think that it became for everyone very clear how to say it without saying it. It's like I'm just wearing a green scarf and that's it. Everybody will know that I'm an accomplice if they need an abortion.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely in the recent years, things shifted with the Marea Verde. Locally, I would say like our first ever march specifically focused on abortion was 2018. So it wasn't that long ago where it was openly said to be specifically for abortion, right? But it's been a really potent shift, I would say, from the moment you have your first ever march for abortion to where we are now. Like in our, and I see it in the question, and I think, what is the relationship between the marches and our processes? In our case, it took us from 2018, from that first march to 2021, where we present or draft a legislative project for the legalization of abortion in Costa Rica, for instance. So like it was a very short amount of years from when you go to the streets for the first time openly about abortion and a document is finally drafted.
And I think that many things happened maybe for a little bit more than 10 years. In Latin America, we were the first countries that launched the hotlines with medical abortion. And I think medical abortion, like self-managed medical abortion, changed, or abortion with pills. I don't know how people mention that in English, but I think that changed the whole narrative, because you didn't need to have a legal abortion in order to have a safe abortion. And that changed the whole concept of it. We didn't have to ask for permission to have abortions. That's not the case anymore. And I think that is also a change in the social norm. And it's also, it's allowing us to be a little bit more brave and a little more open and courageous about being pro-abortion and demanding our rights and demanding that it should be a much more dignified, respected, and like normalized process that women and people that can get pregnant go through. So I think that is a difference that has been like building up and changing. This idea of having a self-managed abortion and being safe, and it allows us to have the diversity of stories around abortion. It was not anymore like this telenovela, a story of an abortion with a lot of blood and it was terrible and the woman almost died or died. These kind of stories that were there when we were growing up, that was like just super scary, and people were
to inflict fear pretty much also. Like what's the purpose of it?
And people come to have abortions and sometimes they feel like they might die and they still want to have it, which is just like eye-opening in terms of like how much is the need of having a safe abortion, and information about that. But I like what you're saying. I think that law can be coming from the streets, but also law can change what's happening on the streets. And I think that Mexico is a good example of that, as like the Mexico City law passed, and then the community has changed around abortion. The way that we talk about abortion completely changed because of that reform on the law. And I think that it also goes both ways. Like it doesn't have to be that everybody is pro something and then it becomes legal. It can also be that it becomes legal, then people realize that it's normal and it should be respected.
I mean, in our experience, that has been the case with same-sex marriage. Because it wasn't a nationally approved shift in our legislation. And everyone was very much concerned as to how was the population going to react when it came to exist. And it's been pretty normal. I think it was more the fear of the unknown for most of the population, not the homophobic side of the population, but for at least the people who were like apprehensive as to the change, it just proved that nothing was changing. Like same-sex couples already existed the same way that abortion already happens. It just comes to regulate it, right? And in our case, I think there's a lot of like the shift for me has been one, understanding that I am not alone in it, in terms of seeing other bodies next to you in the streets, and then also seeing those same bodies being capable of organizing to create a body of potential law that politically it might not happen, but the existence of it is very symbolic in terms of organization. And I would say that is the great value I see when laws come from the streets, as you're saying, right? Like,
yeah, and I think that what's happening in Mexico and Colombia is going to change also the narrative around in the region. I mean, one thing is what happened in Argentina, like the legalization in Argentina, because maybe Uruguay is not as big, or I'm sorry, no, like it doesn't have that much of an influence. I mean, and Mexico City is just a city inside a huge country. So having that law in Argentina, it also make a push for the rest of the countries to explore it. And I think that from the Montevideo consensus, that was the agreed upon thing on abortion. It was, we need to review the abortion laws. It didn't say much, but review the abortion laws, it requires that. What are we reviewing? What are we looking at? How are we making sure that we are not avoiding the issue? And that's what happens with abortion. There's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of taboo, and then people are not talking about it. And when people are not talking about it, Congresses are not talking about it. And then like the law reforms that need to happen in order for people to have access to safe abortion is not happening, and people are not moving from their own way of doing things the old way. So I think this has been a very good push. I mean, in Colombia, they have a campaign that's called Causa Justa, and November 19th, they will be discussing that. And it's about removing abortion from the penal code. And in Mexico, in September, there was a discussion in the Supreme Court around decriminalization of abortion in one state in particular, Coahuila. And what the minister said was that it was against the constitution, the federal constitution, to criminalize abortion. At least the abortion that's decided by like willingly decided by the person that's pregnant. And that is just like it's a good precedent for Colombia for having that discussion. It's an amazing precedent for Mexico. Like finally we got the Supreme Court. I mean, usually the Supreme Court has very good discussions, but on abortion we were having finally a very respectful and I'm not like a professional discussion around it and a deep discussion around it. And it was, if the Constitution is saying that we have reproductive autonomy and reproductive freedom, then we shouldn't be criminalizing one of the practices that comes with the reproductive life, with the reproductive cycle. And abortion is one option, and we shouldn't be criminalizing, because then we are not allowing freedom and autonomy to happen. And I thought that was like the most beautiful thing that a minister could say in life. And we are still waiting for the final sentence so we can have the text. But right now, that means that there can't be any one process for abortion in Mexico. That because that is like that happens automatically with the judiciary power, that any judge around Mexico cannot sentence a woman for having an abortion or a person that's pregnant for having an abortion, which is, I mean, for me, that's amazing. And I hope that sets like an influence or precedent for Colombia to change that, and for the region then, because I think that can be like a domino effect.
Yes, definitely. I think it's similar to the way we expected our debates to be enriched by those that happen in Argentina, and the way that Colombia is happening, focusing on health, and you guys now with this recent news, right? For Central America, I think it's very, very difficult right now, simply because we have a strong chokehold on Congresses by fundamentalist Congress people and fundamentalist religious and like really, really conservative parties that have linked up and allied with even from everything from the Catholic Church to evangelical groups with a lot of economic power in our region. And therefore, pretty much like in terms of developments in laws, I think most of our developments are holding really tightly to like sustain anti-choice laws from being in place or from becoming in place. So it's been very much a defensive role for us, trying to stop or like hold still really strong advancements from their side, right? Like that, I don't know, the idea that life begins at conception through a law, right? And then trying to stop that rights and recognition, and even like the way you inscribe death certificates, everything has been pushed constantly through the last few years here. And it's been very much, I would say, feminist movements and feminist organizations on the defensive side of things, because we don't have such a strong presence in Congress. And that has happened in, I guess, most of the Central American countries during these past few years. So in terms of developments in laws, I wouldn't be able to like report progress as much. But yeah, I think in terms of law, we're like holding
what you have. I think that is the case for Mexico. I mean, at the federal level, we are very much progressive, but at the state level, I think that we're pretty much Central America. And I mean, for geopolitics, I think Mexico is always in a very awkward position, because we are not Central America, but sometimes we behave like Central America, and we have different resources, and people don't understand Mesoamerica, and this kind of weird ways of putting us together in the same bowl. But I think that at the local level in Mexico, it's happening. It's exactly happening what you're saying, Lalis, in terms of just holding on to what we have so that it doesn't get worse. But this ruling, and I'm hoping, and that's why I'm hoping that it comes, it brings the region a little bit of fresh air. But I'm also hoping for that to happen at the state level, because even though any judge can rule against a woman for having an abortion, or a pregnant person, it can also, it hasn't changed the penal codes. And for that to change, that would mean like 30, I mean, we have 33 penal codes to change, because we have 32 states and we have a federal one. That means 33 Congresses discussing, and that is something that it's only possible when you know you have the majority, or that you can make enough leverage in order to do that. And as we know, abortion becomes very often a coin of exchange for something else that might interest them more. And that means financial things and economic stuff. And that is very sad to admit, but that is what actually moves Congresses. The only hope that we have is that parity has been one of the things we have been achieving on the past few legislations. So that is, we can only hope with parity, but having women 50%, that doesn't mean that we have feminists 50%. So
yeah, I had to take a deep breath when you mentioned that, simply because our for the participation of certain women, especially coming from conservative parties, has proven to be even harder to advocate against, because of course they pick the woman to present the most anti-right projects they have in their arsenal, and it's obviously a very smart tactic on their behalf, and a very tough one to combat on our end. But yeah, it happens. And yes, I think it's an improvement for sure. We just have to work hard with women in politics.
Well, if we make it and Colombia makes it, you're going to be in the sandwich. So let's hope for that.
I love it. Yeah.
What is the difference, Mrs. Almost Lawyer, between legalization and decriminalization?
So the decriminalization means it's pretty much not a crime, but it's removing it from the penal code and stopping the penalization and criminalization of the act itself. And then legalization, it means having laws in place that will ensure the access and regulate the practice. It doesn't mean it's the only way it'll happen. It just means there are laws in place that will make it happen, kind of.
Yep. And there's not one way or one model to have a legalization. So it can be like having one abortion law. It can be through the reproductive health bill. It can be through a series of different regulations, or like different like sub norms. You know, it doesn't have to be like a huge law. It can be like a small sets of regulations. And I think that what is more about for me, and what I think that it's more practical, it's how abortions should happen at the hospital level or the clinic level, and who's gonna, you know, like the set of rules, and who can make which abortions, what is the instruments, the tools they're gonna use. Well, how are they gonna decide if it's abortion with pills, or if it's a vacuum aspiration, or how are they gonna decide on who will perform a DNC, who, you know, like having all this very specific procedures. So it falls for me more on the health part, and maybe the social part in terms of deciding who's going to pay for that. You know, like which part of the state is going to pay for that, because it needs to be. And we still, at least in Mexico, we still have a public health sector. We hope to have it for longer, even though we know that there's a lot of push for it to become fully privatized. And as long as we have a public sector, then abortion should be free and should be part of the basic healthcare package that we have.
Yeah, I think it also, that part of legalization reflects more on each nation's, and in your case, each state's functioning. Because like for Uruguay and for countries that are pushing for the health bill and then incorporating it within health scheme, that's pretty much where it's going to go, right? But then I think when you look at Central American regulation, I don't think that's the only way it's going to have or need to be incorporated into bills and stuff like that. But I agree. For me, the most instrumental part of legalization comes down or boils down to protocols and like very specific ways that ensure that everybody gets a unified treatment and like a standardized set of rules that apply to them.
Yeah, it's about quality standards. And I mean, it's not only health, it can also be violence. It can also, like, you know, like there are different streams that are gonna come to that. Even like what to do with the tissue at the end. These kind of things that it's a set of regulations that's gonna happen around to make it practical, feasible, and accessible for everyone. But I think that one part that is really important is that all of this, for example, Mexico has all of that around abortion, but as long as it stays in the penal code, then it's not accessible. It doesn't matter if you were raped, and rape is one of the reasons why that we have an indication for legal abortion across the country. It's not accessible because it is still in the penal code. And then people get confused, like, who's going to authorize me? You know, like, because you need to get to set to a different obstacles to tackle before you actually get the abortion. So that's one part that I want to say in terms of, like, we really need to talk about decriminalization more. And it's not a fight. It's not a one or the other. I think that we need to have both. And one part that people tend to be nervous about is like removing the whole abortion crime from the penal code. And one thing is what about forced abortion? And some people think that forced abortion should stay in the penal code. I disagree, but I wanted to know what you think, Gladys.
I don't, in my experience, I have not been around enough or even one case of forced abortion. And therefore, I think it's like a very tricky window to leave open in terms of, oh, this is so important, abortion cannot leave the penal code because of it. In the practice, I haven't really encountered that situation. And therefore, I am sort of like in your same wavelength in terms of, yeah, we can talk about bodily autonomy, and it can be like, it's already sort of protected, no? Like, nobody can perform medical procedures on someone else without their approval, right? I don't think there needs to be, like, penal codes don't regulate every single medical procedure that can be performed on a human being, but abortion does, right? Like, so there's like a very tricky need for it to still be there. And I for me, it's more of a an unnecessary article that leaves a window open for it.
Yeah, totally.
And for me, there's also like this big issue with our judiciary systems in Latin America, because we cannot brag to the world about how fast our justice systems function. And therefore, when it comes to abortion and something that is timely, sensitive, I think criminalization and the fact that it has a connection to the judiciary system, even in cases of rape, for instance, you need an expedite response by state, and that slows it down. It also makes it more difficult, right? Like, here we don't have an indication for abortion in terms of rape or in cases of rape, but we do have a rape response protocol that includes abortion, or like expedite system, right? And they don't even check if you're pregnant. It's like a hormone cocktail to prevent STIs and pregnancy. And I think it was like a kind of like a goal from previous activists that got like in somehow, but it's one of our most valuable resources right now in terms of prevention of complications later.
Yeah, this prophylaxis that you need to give. We have that in Mexico, the prophylaxis for pregnancy and also for STIs, but we also have abortion. And that is one of the things that one of the newest reforms for that norm. It talks about you don't have to go to the police. You don't have to make a case. You don't have to open a file against the person that raped you. You just need to go to the hospital with a handwriting of your own explaining to them what happened, and then they need to give it to you, and you can come even without any parent from 12 years. So if you're 12 years old and you have been raped, you can go directly yourself and get an abortion, supposedly.
This is my phase of jealousy when you tell me about this. I'm like,
now this is all like, this sounds amazing, but as long as it stays in the penal code, people are afraid of actually going and asking for that.
right.
And requesting it, and the government is not making any advertisement of that, you know. And if people doesn't know, like, it's not like you study before you get raped, like, what are the things that I'm going to be able to do after being raped, you know, like, that is one of the things that happens, that need to be out there, so that people have that information just in case, or they can share it with a friend, or if it happens to them, it can at some point click and say like, oh, I remember that I knew this part.
Yeah, and I think that's also where I have a lot of trouble understanding anti-right movements, because if you ask me, like, where should people gather this information about their own rights and their possibilities and stuff like that, I would say, like, you need sex ed, and you need information, and you need access to medical attention. But if the approach is constantly denial of information, denial of just what you're entitled to, and how to even prevent pregnancy, and the only outcome there is more pregnancy, like, there is literally no other outcome. And I find it so hard to believe and understand that is their approach, right? Like, right now we are in our case, like here in Costa Rica, we're jumping into an electoral process right now, and it's barely getting started. And one of the candidates already started out by saying that he's gonna propose abstinence as his technique. It doesn't even make sense. It's 2021. We thought this was long resolved. Like, this was a conversation that we would never have to like advocate for. And there he is, right? And he has a following. So it's very strange. It's not even like one of those little candidates that you know is not gonna, no. Like, he's the real deal, and there he is. And for me, that is an issue, right? Like, when we say, okay, you're against abortion, but then you're doing absolutely everything to prevent it, huh? No. They're not. Uh-huh.
But it's also, and it's really tricky, and I think that it also sometimes permeates the feminist movement, I'm gonna say, or the sexual reproductive health and rights movement. Sometimes these protectionist approaches to adolescent sexuality comes very close to what the others are saying. That is very scary in terms of you're trying to protect them by not telling them their rights. How is that going to work? How exactly do you think that that's going to work? You're trying to prevent them from having sex by not talking about pleasure. So they're going to have sex without pleasure? You know, like, what are we trying to do? What is the world that we want to build? And I think, well, and we can also stay with this, the decriminalization versus legalization of abortion. Like, it's really, I don't know how to say it, but it's like how we don't need to antagonize with each other in terms of for doing what, you know, like, let's just leave one person doing what they know what to do, and then, you know, like, we can move on. The feminist agenda is huge, and I think that sometimes we think that it's only our way that's going to make it, and instead of, I think that there's a younger push, a younger movement that's asking for pleasure, that's asking for talking about autonomy and bodily autonomy, reproductive freedom and reproductive justice from another space. And I think that discussion, I don't know, kind of settles back into being afraid of asking for more. And that has to do with the abortion laws, like this idea. And sometimes I understand the different context that happens in the States, in Mexico, but sometimes it's really, really frustrating to see them knocking on the door for an extra legal indication for abortion. It's like, why are we looking for, we know that legal indications are not working. We need to be creative. We need to ask for more. And I think we need to learn also from the States, from the US, on how they can use extra, I don't know how to say it, but like making laws longer and longer and longer and longer, so that you can have an obstacle race rather than just a straightforward access to abortion.
Yeah, I think there's also other lessons to learn from the US in terms of how volatile it is. If your only access to abortion is through law, simply because then, I mean, I think Latin America has a really strong understanding of how volatile our governments can be from one election to the next. And I think that is a very interesting concept to manage in terms of, oh, this has to be in place and ensured no matter who is
ruling.
Like, yeah, having the power to decide over our bodies, right? And in terms of that, I think the role of feminist activists and sexual and reproductive justice activists in being creative and understanding that we got to reinvent the wheel constantly is also a part, right? Like there's a really empowering, I would say, force when you understand that you're not alone in it. And I think that bonds Latin America, and abortion has bonded Latin America, I would say, very, very strongly, especially in the last few years where we have technology on our side to, I don't know, use networking and accompanying, and not just accompanying people who desire to abort, but also people who are accompanying people who are desiring to abort, right? Like how we strengthen and how we provide sustainability as one of our strategies to ensure that access in the long term, right? How we support one another, how we empower one another, how we lend our platform to other countries or to other NGOs or to other, groups, I would say, who are advocating for abortion is very valuable in terms of understanding you're not alone in it, understanding that it's a struggle that we're all facing, and also that we're all coming up with like really random different solutions for it, right?
Yeah. And I think like one push for like really, really removing abortion from the penal code, like the whole thing, the whole chapter on abortion is because it can backfire to us. It can backfire to us as an activist. It can backfire to us as a friend of someone that's having an abortion and we're there. It can backfire us if we are like an abortion doula or an abortion accompagnant. And it like we need to be aware that those are the risks. We are putting everyone in risk, and people are having abortions every day. They're not going to wait for that to be legal. They're not going to wait for that to be outside the penal code. So what are we saying? It doesn't make sense. And I think that it's not only about abortion. As feminists, we tend to try to make it, like thicker, the penal code. And why are we doing that? And that's I mean, like, we know that abortion is one of the things that we want to have it out, maybe, or at least thinner than it is. But we're asking for other things that is making thicker those penal codes, and why, like how we make, like what is evidence that having a crime in that book is making anyone stop. We know from abortion it's not stopping anyone. So why do we think that it's going to stop, I don't know, other people? And I'm afraid of the trends also on teenage sexuality and about this, the adolescent sexuality that's just like age of consent. It's from 18 above. It's like, really? Please, show of hands. Who had sex from above 18? No, and before. It's silly. I think that we need to have a deeper analysis on what we are asking for.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a very difficult one. I would say money is one of the big ones for me. In terms of lower, like diminishing the gap of what people who have it are entitled to and able to get right now. In Central America, this gap is massive. And when I question what the big issue is, it boils down to economic power, the quality and attention that you're going to receive in terms of abortion. So I don't think that's fair, and that's my immediate need here. Just empower, like ensuring the resources for abortion access to continue existing for women in need. Our networks, our feminist networks, have limited resources, as do our countries in general. And yeah, I would say that's pretty much my, besides like not it being in the penal code, which we've already said a million times, I would say money is a big one here.
I agree, and I think that when we talk about resources, it boils down to many things. No, it's just like having connection among ourselves, being a community for ourselves, being more able to communicate more effectively about what we're doing, what abortion is. I think that we need to learn more about what law means and what are, like different, I mean, law for non-lawyers. I think that's one part that we need to invest on, because I think that this legalization versus decriminalization push or discussion or whatever, it comes a little bit from not really getting how can you guarantee rights and how you don't guarantee rights. Like, like the penal code is not meant to warrant any kind of not warrant access, not warrant anything. Like, it's not meant to warrant a single thing. It's just to push people outside the margins of society because they've done something that they were not supposed to do. And which is like, why are we we're trying to make a full book of a stigma? It's really weird. But so I feel like that I think that we need to have different ways of doing that and working with mass media. Like, what are we doing with mass media? Mass media are able would be able to show a diversity of abortion stories, show a diversity of ways to live a life that comes with abortions and without abortions. And it doesn't have to be about a trauma. It doesn't have to be, like, it's a way that we can re-educate each other in a much more fun way. And I think that it's rare that we use that kind of platform to change culture. But I think that also I think that we need resources and a lot of courage and creativity in terms of being open about abortion movement. Like, I am an abortion doula, I am pro-abortion, and I am that because there's people that are against abortion, and we need to be able to have a very strong and resistant and resilient movement that's like pushing the others away and also allowing us to advance.
Yeah, I like that. For me, yeah, abortion, as with other issues of the feminist agenda, I would say requires you to question systems and structures that are not necessarily pleasant to question, right? And with which we've grown and just become ourselves on thinking they were static. And when you study law, for instance, I think one of the biggest mistakes we're making is just becoming replicators of something that was there before us and not necessarily questioning, one, who is it serving, and two, how do I take it apart to better function for the objectives of my group or myself, right? And it might be silly, but it's sort of like, Matrix, when you take this pill and you understand this system that you create yourself. But it's sort of how I feel like when it comes to law and state and structures that we take for granted, that are static and that are the way they are and they will always remain the way they are. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we stop thinking about the grand picture. Right. And I understand how it can be frustrating to not see results, like immediate results in my immediate vicinity. But when you see past it, and sort of the numbers start to fall, right? Like the curtain of numbers. This is the geek side of me coming out in the interview. But like, I feel like that is also very hopeful, like in terms of understanding that a system is not static and that you have the power, maybe not on your own alone, but like in community, to shift things significantly. I think that is a very powerful thing. And I think that is something that could also feed or make more potent the work that we are currently doing, because it doesn't make us smaller. Instead, it pushes us to like think bigger, and I think that's very powerful as well.
And I think that happens sometimes because we transmit our frustrations to different generations of feminists, you know? Like, I think that we need to keep the eye on what is the world that we're building, and also celebrate every fucking single win or not lost that we had, you know? Like, just we need to dance and dance and dance and keep dancing so that we can balance a little bit the frustration of being in this world and not the one that we want.
Yeah.
You know, and just like re-energize and being able to not, you know, being very aware that am I saying this from an optimist or, you know, like way, or am I just being a frustrated one when I'm saying like what the reality is? Like, just when you're saying the reality is, like, pause for a second, breathe deep. Is this frustration that's coming out? Just like keep it to yourself. Like my grandma said, you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. No, but you know, like in terms of like, why would I be doing this? Just not like let it out another way. And I think that we as feminists should be dancing. In Mexico, we should be dancing a lot, and I think that we all want to be celebrating the rulings of the Supreme Court, and we're not able because of the pandemic, which I hate a lot. But I think that we need to find virtual ways of celebrating and have fun and move our bodies and just keep the optimist vibe.
I agree. Just invite me, okay?
Okay, we will. Please.